Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having us here. I am Rokas Daugėla from law firm R.Daugėla Norkus in Lithuania. I specialize mostly in taxation matters, but I will try to give a brief presentation about legal and tax aspects of doing business in Lithuania, some very basics. And I understand that some of you may be familiar with those concepts because they are very common between Latvia and Lithuania. So I will try to focus more about recent developments, some new opportunities, and I will try to leave as many time as possible for your questions, because you really have an opportunity to ask a particular question. I will do all my best to answer your questions. And my colleague Toms, who is also here from the same law firm, will try to answer if you have any questions about Latvian legal and tax aspects of trade or doing business in Lithuania. So let me start. I'm not sure if it's working. Okay. Good. Yeah, so this slide basically sums up what is the most attractive features of doing business in Lithuania, and sums up the success that Lithuania has achieved over last 10 or 20 years of becoming a very attractive jurisdiction for foreign investors. When talking to foreign investors, with whom a lot we work, they say that one of the most important benefits is our good geographical location, which is, I think, also important for Latvian businesses, because Lithuania is the largest market in the Baltic states in terms of consumers. It also has access, and it has good trade relations with Belarus, with Ukraine, with some other countries, and some of the investors that are coming to Lithuania are really keen on using those relations. Second very important feature is our well-educated workforce. As it was mentioned in the movie, around half of the Lithuanian population have higher education, which means that you may engage in production, in research and development, in high value-added services industries, and you will have enough workforce to fulfill your needs. Well, lastly, but of course it's also very important, is our tax system, our tax and legal system, which is, I'd say, quite modern and in line with most developed European countries. Our corporate income tax rate is one of the lowest in the European Union. I know it is the same as in Latvia, but I would say we have some very attractive extras in the form of free economic zones, in the form of various tax incentives for research and development, for manufacturing and other investment projects. And we also have some government support, which comes in monetary form. This is the program Invest LT Plus, which provides support, basically funds, to foreign investors who are establishing their operations in Lithuania and satisfying certain criteria. And actually those all features has led to Lithuania having such international brand names like Barclays, Siemens, Western Union, and some of them has really become a great success. For example, Barclays, when they opened their shared service center in Lithuania, it was planned that they will have around 250 employees. Now the latest numbers are that they have close to 1,000, and they are thinking about expanding even more. So it means that there's really a good supply for IT and other service specialists, and international companies are recognizing it. The same is for Western Union. I think the starting number was 400 IT and other specialists, and now they also have around 800. So it means that we really have a lot of workforce, and it is available for your and other investors' use. When talking about starting the business or doing trade, providing services in Lithuania, there are, I would say, 4 ways of doing it. The most common and I would say easiest way is establishing an enterprise. It means a joint stock company. In some cases, you may acquire an existing company with operations there, or you may establish a branch or representative office. Of course, since we are in the European Union, nobody restricts Latvian businesses on simply trading or providing services on cross-border basis, just exercising freedom of provision of services and carrying out activities without establishing a legal entity. Of course, it may lead to certain tax implications, because doing business and trading in Lithuania may be taxed with corporate income tax and VAT and some other taxes. But I will try to focus mostly about the first alternative, because from our experience is the most common one. The procedure of opening a company is really straightforward. The capital requirements and other requirements are rather low. So in majority cases we see Latvian and other foreign investors simply opening up a joint stock company and starting the business from there. This table gives you a brief comparison of 2 most common types of joint stock companies in Lithuania. The one on the left is a private limited liability company, and the one on the right is typically for larger operations, public companies, and companies that want to go public, shares to be traded on a stock exchange or be engaged in other public activities. So the share capital is 10,000 litas, which is around 3,000 euros. I believe this is very similar to Latvian requirements. And the company may be set up in 5-6 days if you are doing it in the old-fashioned way and bringing all the papers to the register physically. And it may be as short as 2-3 business days if you are doing it via our e-registry portal. So you can have a company up and running in 2-3 days. Of course, it's worth mentioning that in order to be ready for business operations, you might need to employ people, register in the VAT payers register, and well, typically this takes another 2-3 weeks. But what we say to all investors, that in 2-3 weeks time you may have a company fully operational, fully running with employees and with VAT registration and ready to make trade or supply services. The costs of establishing the private limited liability company is around 250 euros. If you are doing it on your own, well, the registration is in Lithuanian, but I know that there are translations into English. There are instructions made in English. I'm not sure if there are any instructions in Latvian, but if you speak and understand English language, I'm pretty sure that you can set up a basic company on your own. This slide is about corporate governance of companies. This is especially important in case you acquire shares in Lithuanian companies or if you are doing business together with a couple of business partners. I won't go in all those details. I will just mention the most important thresholds. It's of course 25% plus one vote, which means that such shareholder can block all major decisions in the annual shareholders meeting, which is the main governance body of a company. 50% plus one vote gives you the right to adopt some of the decisions, some daily decisions in the annual shareholders meeting, and the 75% threshold plus one share gives you absolute power of the company, and you may adopt basically all decisions that concern beginning, life, and the end of the company. So in case you may have a business partner, take this into account, and in many cases we lawyers see that companies that have a couple of partners or a joint venture, they sign a shareholders agreement in order to avoid such situations where it's difficult to reach a decision and the company cannot operate properly. So these are the most important thresholds. There are some other thresholds that are mentioned below the table, but these are only for public companies that are traded on stock exchange, so I won't elaborate on that too much. Of course, when opening a company and operating in Lithuania, it's very important to determine whether operations are subject to licensing requirements, because this is already a large list, but it's not exhaustive, and I have come across some strange activities like production of road signs, and they are also subject to certain registrations. So I believe it is very important to get in touch with some local advisors before starting operations in Lithuania to make sure that no licenses or registrations are required, or if there are any requirements, you are fulfilling them. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Okay, so now we come to taxation. I will not try to give you a comprehensive presentation because in one sentence you may say that basic principles of taxation are very similar in Lithuania and Latvia. The corporate income tax rate, the taxation of employees, the level of taxation of employees is very similar. So I will try to develop more about what we see as Lithuanian advantages. One of the first advantages, the wide bilateral taxation treaty network. It's getting close to 50 tax treaties, and it's worth mentioning that we have some beneficial treaties with important trade partners like Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and some others, and we know that there are some more treaties negotiated. So in some cases it's even beneficial for Latvian and other foreign businesses to trade via a Lithuania company in order to get better conditions in terms of double taxation and avoidance of double taxation. So basically establishing a Lithuanian company and trading through a Lithuanian company may lead to certain tax advantages and certain tax savings. As I mentioned, the standard corporate income tax rate is 15, but we have a lower one, which is 5%, and it is especially important for small operations. If you are starting your business in Lithuania and your turnover does not reach 300,000 euros per year, and you do not exceed 10 employees, your company does not have more than 10 employees, you can basically enjoy a lower corporate income tax rate, which I believe is the lowest in the European Union. I don't think you can go lower than 5%. So for starting up the operations, I believe this is a very important feature. And as I mentioned, in addition to this lower corporate income tax rate, we have certain incentives on larger investment projects. We have tax incentives on R&D activities, whereby the tax rate can also be reduced to 5 or even 0%. Now, the special taxation regime is applicable in free economic zones. The main tax advantage is, of course, exemption from corporate income tax, which is for first 6 years of operations. After 6 years, the company may enjoy 50% reduction from the standard corporate income tax rate for next 10 years. So at the moment, the standard corporate income tax rate is 15%. So the effective tax rate in the tax-free zone, free economic zone, is 7.5%. There are limitations for companies that are willing to establish their operations in free economic zones. It is operational restrictions. You need to be engaged in production activities, provision of services. Not all services, for example, financial services do not qualify. But if you are engaged in manufacturing, repackaging, warehousing, some IT services, support services activities, then you may establish a company in a free economic zone and carry out operations from there, and you will enjoy the lower corporate income tax rates. Currently, there are 2 free economic zones in Lithuania. One is in Kaunas, which is located nearby, actually, it borders with Kaunas International Airport, and we have spoken to our Lithuanian investment agency, and they mentioned that there are plans to develop a joint business park so that some activities that require cargo shipping cargo carriage with airplanes may go directly from the free economic zone to the airport, and there will be some other advantages, and this is being developed. The other free economic zone that is currently operating is in Klaipėda. This is in the Lithuanian seaport. And the most recent news is that there are 2 free economic zones that are being started up at this very moment. One is in Kėdainiai, which is on the way to Kaunas, from Riga to Kaunas, and the other one is in Panevėžys, which is really close to Latvian border. And we know that there are plans to start a free economic zone in Šiauliai as well, which is as well very close to Latvia. So in certain cases, it's worth considering maybe moving some production activities from Latvia just across the border and establishing a company in the free economic zone and then enjoying all those tax incentives. Another important topic when talking about establishing a company and doing business in Lithuania is employment, because in this area we are a little bit more stricter and maybe behind the recent trends in Europe, because there are a lot of imperative rules which have to be respected. And my advice before going in those details would be that if you are employing a Lithuanian person and the employment contract is subject to Lithuanian law, you should take into account and respect all the Lithuanian requirements, because they are imperative, and if you won't add them into the contract, they will be valid anyway. So in order to make sure that you are aware of the situation and of all the imperative rules, you should take into account those restrictions, such as the minimum trial period, it's 3 months, or the minimum paid annual leave, which is 28 calendar days, some increased salary requirements for overtime work or work during public holidays. This needs to be taken into account because it's mandatory, and the employer may be fined by our employment authorities, and these rules will be enforced anyway. As it was mentioned before, the average gross monthly wage in Lithuania is somewhere around 650 euros, but the minimum wage is close to 300 euros. The employment taxation system in Lithuania is made in the same way as in Latvia, which means that part of social security tax is paid by the employer at its own expense. So it means, for example, that if you are paying a minimum monthly salary to the employee, which is 300 euros, the total costs of the employment will be somewhere around 380 euros, because 30% of social security tax is added on top of the gross salary. Here we have the slide about the main taxation numbers. So the social security rate of 39.98 is divided into 2 parts. 9% are paid by the employee, so it's withheld by the employer, and the 31%, almost 31%, is paid by the employer at its own expense. And 15% personal income tax is, of course, also applicable to the employment income, such as salary, and it's withheld from the salary. You may see in those smaller numbers the Latvian figures, but I'm sure you are aware with them. These are also listed some of the main restrictions and requirements that are related to firing an employee. If an employment contract needs to be terminated, it has to be done on a mutual basis, or it has to be done with appropriate terms of information. So the term of initiative period, what we call an initiative period, may be from 2 to 4 months, depending on how long the employee has been working in the company. And again, this is a period for which the employer has to pay. So even if you want to let go the person right away, you have to notify the person and you have to pay him his full salary during this term. So it also is an important aspect. I would like to briefly touch upon employment of aliens, which means that employees who are coming to work to Lithuania from outside of European Union, they are subject to work and residence permits, but this is of course not applicable to citizens and residents of the European Union, because according to the regulations, anyone from Latvia may come to work and live in Lithuania without need for any permits, and so do their family members. And there are also regulations that solve the social security questions. So if Latvian employees come to work to Lithuania for a period shorter than 2 years, and they maintain their residence in Latvia, they may still be subject to Latvian social security system. Which means that basically if you are starting up your operations and you want to be general manager of your own Lithuanian company, and you have to pay yourself a salary, which is mandatory, you do not need to pay social security to the Lithuanian budget. You may pay your social security here in Latvia, and it will be part of your basis for pension and other benefits. you will only have to pay personal income tax in Lithuania. Yeah.
Are there any language requirements? Are there any language requirements for people who would like to work in Lithuania from European countries but who do not speak Lithuanian?
Well, officially there are no language requirements except for one, that the national language is Lithuanian, so all official documents such as documents concerning the life of the company or employment contracts, they should be drafted in Lithuanian, but nobody restricts you from having a bilingual version, which means that you may draft all your documents in two languages, Latvian on one side, Lithuanian on another side. It is just for public interest, so that everyone can be aware of what is in those documents, but talking about your own company and how you handle things in your own company, it is totally up to you whether you communicate with your employees in Latvian, in English, whether your contracts are also in Latvian or English, aside from Lithuanian. So I would say that the requirement exists, but it's not strict. Basically, you are free to act as you want, as long as the public interest is secured. And coming to the last slide is investment protection. It's another quite important topic that we come across more and more. It's the Lithuanian bilateral investment treaty network that contains somewhere around 50 treaties, and again a favorable treaty with Latvia, and which means that in case of investment from Latvia into Lithuania, and in case of failure or some negative measures taken by the government or other bodies against such investment, it will be protected under the bilateral investment treaty, and the dispute will be argued not in the court but in an arbitrage. So I mean, it is very important that in case of certain measures taken against private investment, you don't need to go to Lithuanian national courts and to argue your case there, because you may go to a private body for settling the disputes, and we see such process as much more reliable, quicker, and it also restricts Lithuania from imposing strange measures or taking some negative actions against foreign investments. So this would be all that I wanted to tell you about the basics. I would like to welcome very much your questions, and my colleague Toms is here to answer if you have any questions from Latvian side. And maybe you have anything to add about Latvian perspective.
Jā, es varbūt īsumā vienu nelielu komentāru no Latvijas aspekta. Kā mēs redzam no savas ikdienas sadarbības ar Lietuvas kolēģiem, tad diemžēl nospiedošs pārsvars ir to lietuviešu uzņēmēju, kas nāk pie mums strādāt, tirgojās, pērk kapitāla daļas mūsu kompānijās un dara citas aktīvas lietas nekā to latviešu uzņēmēju skaits, kas dodās otrā virzienā uz Lietuvu. Īsti tāda racionāla izskaidrojuma man nav, laikam tāpat viena latviešu mentalitāte vien būs, jo, kā jūs redzējāt no prezentācijas, tās sistēmas ir ļoti līdzīgas, pamatlietas ir tiešām, tur liela atšķirība nav, tā kā nav ko baidīties no nezināmā, un tātad jūsu rokās ir, lai šo proporciju izlīdzinātu.
So maybe any questions, because we still have around 20 minutes or even half an hour.
I have a question. How to be sure that nobody will copy the product? For example, if a Latvian company is entering Lithuanian market with its product and it's just afraid about copying, that Lithuanian will copy this product, what are the steps to do? What licenses, where to look for them, and so.
Well, my short comment, maybe Tom can expand a little bit more, is that if you have a product which is subject to copyright and is protected in Latvia, the first thing that you should do, you should expand your protection either to Lithuania or to all European Union, because you do not need to go through the same procedure to copyright your product or your idea or your trademark. Once you have done it in Latvia, I know that there are simplified procedures of expanding your copyrights in the European Union countries.
Jā, tā kā kolēģis arī pareizi saka, vienkārši ir jāreģistrē Eiropas preču zīme, kas būs spēkā ne tikai Latvijā, bet arī visā Eiropas Savienībā. Un, tas arī viss, tā procedūra nav patiesībā tik dārga, es precīzi tagad nepateikšu, cik tas maksā, bet man liekas, nebija īpaši dārgāk kā pašā Latvijā uz vietas reģistrēt preču zīmi.
We didn't have a situation between Lithuania and Latvia, but of course we have seen some forged iPhones or, I don't know, Jägermeister or some other very well-known brands. But I think this is a little bit of a different issue, because this is a well-known brand being duplicated and forged, and this is of course against the law, and I am pretty sure that those products are copyrighted in Lithuania. So it's not this, I would say, this situation. But in order to make sure that nobody's faster than you to register a copyright and to involve you in a large dispute, who was first and whose right is the real one to have a copyright to the product, I think you should expand your copyrights to all European Union countries. I don't think it costs you a lot of time and money, and it gives you some extra security in case you start trading in other countries, except, I mean, you go abroad from Latvia. There was a question.
So, pie tā iepriekšējā vēl nedaudz, kā jebkurā valstī ieejot tirgu, jāņem vērā arī domēnu vārdu reģistrācija. Jūs taisties Lietuvā kaut ko pārdot, tirgoties, un jūs vēlēsieties reģistrēt LT domēnu, tad varbūt labāk to darīt pirms jau ir uzsāktas kaut kādas mārketinga aktivitātes, lai kādi veikli darboņi nepaspētu reģistrēt šo te domēnu, un pēc tam nebūtu pa dārgu naudu no viņiem jāatpērk šis domēns.
Lūdzu, esiet aktīvi, var uzdot jautājumus arī latviski, neobligāti angļu valodā. Tur bija pirms tam.
Pastāstiet, lūdzu, vai ir kaut kādas principiālas atšķirības pie, teiksim, līguma sastādīšanas Latvijā un Lietuvā, varbūt kaut kādas specifiskas tiesību normas, un otrs jautājums, kāda ir praksa, teiksim, mazo strīdu risināšanā šķīrēja tiesās, vai tā sistēma ir līdzīga tikai pie mums?
Jā. Tātad par jautājumu pirmo daļu par dažādām līgumu slēgšanas niansēm, cik mēs arī saskaramies ikdienas sadarbībā ar Lietuvas kolēģiem, atšķirību praktiski nav nekādu. tā pamata civiltiesību sistēma ir diezgan līdzīga. Kaut kādas nianses varbūt ir, ja jums līgumā būs ierakstīts, ka viņš ir saskaņā ar Lietuvas likumiem, tad tomēr būtu labi, ja kāds Lietuvas jurists viņu apskatītos, vai tur nav kaut kādi apslēptie zemūdens akmeņi, ko mēs te neesam paši pamanījuši, vai kas mums nešķiet acīm redzami, bet liela atšķirība noteikti nav. Tā kā var droši slēgt līgumus ar lietuviešiem, gan pēc Lietuvas likumiem, gan pēc Latvijas likumiem. Tikai, kā es teicu, tad, ja pēc Lietuvas, tad tomēr, lai kāds no Lietuvas puses pārbauda to līgumu. Un tad par tiem strīdiem kolēģis pakomentēs.
I can only answer in English, but my short comment would be that if a contract is governed by Lithuanian law, then it is subject to mandatory requirements of Lithuanian civil code. And of course it may have some specific provisions, and there are a lot of articles depending on the type of the contract. But generally, trading between two private parties, there is no restriction to draft and conclude a contract which is governed by Latvian law. So if the counterparty, your Lithuanian trade partner, agrees to that, you may draft a contract and conclude it which is subject to Latvian law. And this rule of freedom of contracts is only subject to very few limitations for very specific civil activities or civil contracts. So I would say if we are talking about trade of goods or trade of services, you may foresee in the contract that it is subject to Latvian law, and the disputes will be resolved in Latvian courts or in an arbitration. It's basically the main principle of the freedom of the contracts.
Jā, un tātad tiesa un šķīrēties spriedumi mums ir savstarpēji izpildāmi, tātad gan Latvijas tiesas spriedumi ir izpildāmi Lietuvā, gan arī otrādi, gan šķīrēties, gan parastās tiesas, tā kā, par to arī nebūtu pamata uztraukties, ka nevarēs kaut ko piedzīt pēc tam no biznesa partneriem. Tas, protams, ja būs no kā piedzīt.
Jautājums saistīt ar maksātnespēju gadījumā, ka jūsu valstī risina jautājumus par to, ka ir kaut ko uzņēmums bankrotē, var fiziskā persona atzīta par bankrotu, ja? Kāda jūsu valstī tiesiskā regulējums par to? Paldies.
Of course, companies may go insolvent. This is a standard feature of the law, and I would say that the procedures of bankruptcy or liquidation are very general. I'm not an expert, so I do not want to comment on the peculiarities, but I would say that the requirements for liquidation or bankruptcy of corporate entities is probably very similar to Latvian procedures. And if you would have a particular question, I could maybe ask my colleagues to comment on that, but I cannot go into many details. I think now it's already possible for a private individual also to go insolvent. I think Latvia was first to adopt insolvency of private individuals, and I know that in Lithuania it's not very popular. Maybe popular is not a very good word. It's not working properly because the procedures are very strict and the restrictions are also very strict. So I know that it is more common for people to go abroad and declare insolvency than to declare insolvency in Lithuania. Maybe it's due to the fact that it's very new and not very common for Lithuanians. Any more questions?
I have such a practical question. If a Latvian company wants to participate in public procurement, sometimes for making these documents you need to sign electronically. What is the process? How practical does it work? Because I remember some time ago it was not properly working, this electronically submission of this signature, this electronic signature. So how is it some company where you need to register, or what is it? How does process work for foreign company at the moment?
The process is basically the same for all companies and individuals, whether private or public, whether foreign or Lithuanian, and all the purchases, all the procurement projects are carried out under one portal, and basically in order to participate in those procurements you need to be registered and identified as a member of this system. And once you have done that, I do not know of any other difficulties or extra requirements for foreign businesses. Well, I speak good Lithuanian, so for me it's not a problem, and I'm not sure whether this system also has an English version, but that might be the only difficulty, I think, because I have personally participated in some procurements, and I know that you can access the system with your personal identification. In Lithuania, we acquired this personal identification via our electronic banking system, and once you have this, you may submit your documents with an electronic signature or simple copies, scanned copies with a signature, and these are typically sufficient.
But this process itself about the registration of yourself in this system, if you are a foreigner, either a private person or company, there was some problems with that. Do you need to come to Lithuania for registering? If you know this process.
I'm not very well aware of the process, and probably I can only tell you this, that you shouldn't be required to physically come to Lithuania, but the difficulty is that the identification is linked to electronic banking and only to Lithuanian electronic banking. So the difficulty that you may have is that you do not have a Lithuanian bank account and you do not have access to Lithuanian electronic banking system. So that's why you may have some difficulties of acquiring this identification that you need to access the portal with. But once you are past that step, it's definitely easy. I have done it myself, so it has to be easy.
I can comment a bit about the situation. If you have a bank account in Lithuania, you have an electronic signature, but it does not work for center of registry. And the situation up to this year was that foreign European citizen could not get this electronic signature, but the one from Russia, for example, they can. So that's a strange situation, but it is.
Probably it's easier to find the person who will represent the company in Lithuania, so to get this done.
This can be done on the basis of power of attorney.
Yeah, power of attorney.
Vēl jautājumi? Mums vēl ir mazliet laiks. Jā.
Kādas jūs varētu ieteikt publiskas datubāzes, lai pārbaudītu potenciālos sadarbības partnerus? Viņiem ir kaut kāda nodokļu parāda maksāt nespējas, PVN apliecības tādā garā.
There are two public bodies in Lithuania. One is Invest Lithuania, which is dealing with all foreign investments. The foreigners are coming and looking for opportunities to establish their business, to rent an office. They're asking for some legal advisors and some other basic information. So Invest Lithuania is a go-to institution which can help you with all those things when establishing operations in Lithuania. There's another one which is Enterprise Lithuania, and this is for Lithuanian businesses that are exporting their goods and doing business with foreign counterparties. So I believe that if a Latvian business is looking for some Lithuanian counterparties with whom to trade or with whom to make a joint venture, I believe that Enterprise Lithuania could help you with some basic information about some trade partners. And when we're talking about public databases, of course there are all those private credit companies that can give you information about credibility, about indebtedness of Lithuanian companies. And I believe these are all the same that are operating in Latvia, such as, I don't know, Credit Reform and, I don't know, just other companies that are engaged in similar activities, if that was the question. When talking about tax, there's public information on the website of State Revenue Service, where information is updated either monthly or quarterly. I cannot tell you exactly, but the largest debtors are publicly made available. I'm not sure if all of those are put in the list, but the largest debtors for VAT and corporate income tax are definitely there. And if you need a more detailed information or you want to check a very particular trade partner, then I believe that a private credit control company can give you more information just from their own database, because they have access to social security databases and some other public databases where the debtors are registered.
Nu, tad, kā redzat, Latvijā mazliet situācija ir labāka, katrs var ieiet vide datu bāzē un par jebkuru juridisku personu šobrīd noskaidrot par parādiem Lietuvā, kā mēs dzirdējām tikai par lielākajiem.
It's just another database. I think there are more like this, and I cannot recommend any. I cannot recommend any of those private databases because they are just private companies. They are providing a service for which you have to pay. I am using some of those databases myself when I need to check credibility of the counterparty that our clients are doing business with, and typically they render very good results. They have access to various databases, so if you don't find information that you're looking for on those public sources, which is basically the website of the State Revenue Service, which is in Lithuanian, so I believe that the most appropriate thing would be to go to a credit control agency and to ask to provide a small report about a counterparty. It is not expensive. I think it's within 10 euros for a basic report for one company.
How big is the difference between in the process of registering OAB or affiliate, like filialis? Exactly the process of registering. Is it more expensive, less expensive? Is it more difficult? Because sometimes companies are just coming. What is easier to establish, and what is the biggest difference? Why should I establish this or that?
Well, of course, it is much easier to establish a branch of a Latvian company, because a branch is not a separate legal entity, so you do not need to have a director. You are not required to form a share capital, so it's definitely cheaper and easier to do business in Lithuania by establishing a branch. And as I mentioned in my presentation, for some startup activities, you don't even need a branch. You may simply come to Lithuania, employ a Lithuanian sales representative if you need one, and you may simply carry out activities on cross-border basis, because this is allowed perfectly within the European Union. But going back to the differences, I would say that, of course, it is easier and cheaper to establish a branch, but you may have to take into account that it's not a separate legal entity. So if you want to separate the contractual relationships or liability, you will not do so by establishing a representative office or a branch.
Jā, nu tā tad, protams, jāņem vērā, ka, kā jau kolēģis teica, ka filiāla nav atsevišķa juridiska persona un visi tie līgumi, kurus jūs būsiet noslēguši, būs atbildība ar pilnu Latvijas kompānijas mantu, tātad nebūs norobežot šī atbildība. Tas arī jāņem vērā. It kā kārdinājums sākumā ļoti viegli nodibināt filiāli, bet, ja tā padomā dziļāk, tad varbūt tomēr labāk tās Lietuvas operācijas norobežot šajā te UAB, kur ir tomēr ierobežot atbildību. Un, ja nu kas neizdosies, tad tā Lietuvas kompānija varēs tikt nodot uz maksāt nespēju, un Latvijas biznesa netiks skarts šādā gadījumā.